All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Thrive After Sports podcast. I'm here today with my man, Yves Batoba. Been excited to have this man on the show for quite some time. We're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right into this man's story. It's a powerful story. And whether you're a current athlete or a former athlete, when you're listening to Yves tell his story, I really want you to envision yourself and take things away from his story so that you can apply it to your own life. So if you don't know Yves, if you've been living under a rock for some reason, you're not familiar with this man, he's an author, a speaker, an entrepreneur, but that really just scratches the surface of what this man is up to. So first and foremost, Yves, man, thank you for spending some time on the Thrive After Sports podcast today, man.
Hey, Taj, I appreciate you having me on, man. Everything that you talk about here is right in my wheelhouse. So I love this topic. Excited to get into this conversation.
Yes, sir. Hey, this could easily turn into a 3-hour podcast. We're going to dive right
easily.
in, man. Now, I know you played football at Oklahoma State, which that is a story in and of itself. But one of the things is I've been doing my research on you, man, your journey to even before you started playing football, you were born in the Democratic Republic of Congo, formerly known as Zaire.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about, what that journey was like growing up there? And before you even started playing football, what was it like? What was your journey to getting to the U.S. like? Let's just start there.
Yeah. So when I was born, the country was called Zaire, and it's no longer called that. So I always like to say I was born in a country that no longer exists. I wrote a book last year that I published, and those are the opening lines of my book, right? Chapter 1 is called Son of Zaire. The very first words, I was born in a country that no longer exists. But it was a great experience, man. Honestly, man, I loved growing up in Africa. I had a very, I feel like my experiences allowed me to have an extremely well-rounded point of view, but my family and I, we had to escape the country whenever there was a civil war that broke out back in 97, 98. And as a result of that, we were living as refugees in Johannesburg, South Africa, shortly after. And while living in South Africa, we had just a horrible experience. I'm talking about the racism. My mom got beat. My little brother got death threats. Our house got broken into. We didn't have any friends at school. And this is post-apartheid South Africa. Nelson Mandela was president at the time, and we just couldn't handle it much longer. So we were fortunate to where we had a friend of the family who lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Irving, Texas, to be specific. So we moved to Irving, and that's how, I got, really entrenched in the football culture. Because if you know anything about the state of Texas, football is a religion, right? You worship it over here. So I remember it was actually a friend's dad, right? My neighbor's dad who introduced me. He was like, hey, you're going to go try out for the football team, 7th grade. I was like, I don't know what the sport is you speak of. I had just learned how to speak English. My first language is French. So he goes and he explains that to me. And he was like, yeah, you're fast. Just get the football and run that way. I was like, all right, cool. So I'm going to try out for running back. And that's pretty much how my football journey started, man. Didn't know anything about the sport. All we knew was education, some politics, and hey, make sure you get good grades and don't get in trouble.
Wow, man. So now I know you started playing football in 7th grade, but how old were you when you first got to Texas?
Man, got here when I was 8 years old.
Okay. You got here at 8. And then what was that? That's like 4 years later, right? 4 years you started playing?
Yeah. So, immediately it's, you're just getting acclimated to the culture, right? Like whenever I got here, it was my first time being exposed to so many different types of people. And what I mean by that is I remember the first time I saw my first white person, I was 6 years old. I remember the day, and I asked my mom about it. And, moving to South Africa, you're exposed to a little more, but it's still, over 70% Black people. Coming to Irving, Texas, extremely diverse. The apartments that we lived at, I had friends that were Mexican, friends that were white, friends that were African American, friends that were from the Middle East. Loved my experience living in the apartments there. And then we moved to the suburbs. So living in the suburbs, I'm the only Black person in my class. I'm looking around like I ain't never been in a situation like this, but it didn't really register because all I wanted was to make sure that I had friends, right? That's really all I cared about at the time. And you just care about what your friends think. So for those, 2 years, 4 years, even leading up to when I started playing football, it was just all about, hey, making as many friends as possible.
Man, that's great, man. It's so funny. Just a quick side note. Obviously I didn't come from Africa, at least, first generation, but when I was 8 years old, I basically moved from the hood to the suburbs, like you're saying. And so you start to learn, you get around different people, and it's culture shock at first. But football, it ties it all in together, man. You start playing a sport, you learn how to work with people from different backgrounds. So
Yes.
I just appreciate you going into that journey a little bit, man.
That's probably one of my favorite things that I loved about being an athlete, man, is just, hey, all these people from different backgrounds coming together for something that's bigger than themselves. That's one of my biggest takeaways from sports, throughout all the years.
Most definitely, man. And so when you start playing football in 7th grade, was it just like an instant love affair with the game? Were you playing other sports? Or was it like, nah, I just want to play football?
Bro, I didn't even know the rules. Like I barely even knew, I barely knew what I was doing. I'm playing safety and I'm playing running back. My coach wanted me to be a punt and a kickoff returner so bad, but I couldn't catch. I couldn't feel the ball to save my life. Every time it would hit me, he was like, "Come on!" And like at the end of practice, he would have everybody run after me and punt the ball to me, and I had to catch it before practice could be over. But I don't think that worked out really well for him. I just had horrible hands. But yeah, so hardly even knew the rules, man. It wasn't probably until about 10th, 11th grade for when I got really, familiar with at least what to do during football, but I didn't take it that seriously, man. Up to that point, it was just all about, hey, I'm out here with my friends and I'm having fun. And it really wasn't until the summer before my senior year, whenever going into that two-a-days, and I'm about to be the starter. Everybody's talking about how, hey, this is going to be a big year for us. We're going to go to the playoffs for the first time in years. And that's when I started to take it really seriously. Look, I'll tell you like this. That was the most that I ever devoted myself to something at that point in my life, right? I'm talking about like the workouts, the two-a-days, to the point where I had full body cramps twice and I had to get sent to the emergency room because of it, because I wanted to push my body so bad. But you really learn about sacrifice whenever you play sports, and you really, really devote yourself, and you have that accountability from your teammates, man. So if there's one thing that football taught me, it's the price of commitment. And yeah, man, it was an incredible just journey into figuring out like, hey, this is what it means to really be fully devoted towards something.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for going into that a little bit. And I actually heard on another interview that you shared, you didn't even know up until a certain point that you could get an athletic scholarship for playing football. But yet here you were still dedicating yourself to the game. So at what point did you realize that? And then was there a shift after you realized, oh, I can get, a scholarship for this? Like, was there a shift that happened once you realized that?
Yeah, I mean, a whole bunch of my friends were talking about different colleges that they wanted to go to, and, the sports that they wanted to play. So at some point, I remember I received a letter. I want to say it was North Dakota State. And my coach was telling me about it. He was like, hey, you got this letter. Make sure you fill this out all the way, return it to the coach, and we're going to get them to recruit you. I didn't know what the heck he was talking about. So I didn't fill it out. I was like, I don't know what this is. I just got rid of it. No, it was South Dakota State. So I ended up just getting rid of it. And I knew nothing about the process, the whole recruiting process, all that. In my mind, I just said, hey, whenever I get to college, I'm going to try out for the football team, just like I did here in high school. I'm going to make the team, and we're just going to go forward. So I end up getting an academic scholarship, actually, right? It came down to 2 different schools. Ended up going to Oklahoma State University, and the reason why was because they had one of only 2 sports media programs in the nation at the time. So I ended up going to that because I wanted to be a sports media major, and I ended up switching majors after my first year anyway. But by that point, I was already in love with the culture. I loved being a part of the Cowboy family, and I walked on at Oklahoma State, was fortunate enough to make the team, and then eventually was able to earn a football scholarship under Coach Mike Gundy.
That's great, man. So you went into it on an academic scholarship, which is awesome. And then you earned a football scholarship. Was that your junior year, your senior year?
Yeah, it was junior year. Yeah, that's second semester of my junior year.
That's great, man. Congratulations. It's always one of those cool things where you see guys who walk on and they have the celebration. Did they do like a big celebration for you or anything?
Hey, this is before the celebrations were even a thing, bro. Like I was literally I went in there like, they called me into the office. They said, hey, we're going to put you on scholarship. And I remember, bro, I felt so, I don't know, it was an exciting feeling. It was almost like a relief. By that point, I had actually lost my academic scholarship. That's a whole nother story of how I ended up losing my scholarship, because I had an ex-girlfriend that was diagnosed with cancer, and I didn't care about anything that had to do with sports, anything that had to do with academics. And all I wanted to do was make sure that she was okay. So watching her go through chemo and everything, I lost track. The stress got to me, mild depression. I remember having a panic attack in my room even. Nothing really mattered to me. And then I was really fortunate, man. I had some great teammates and some coaches that were able to kind of lift me out of that season of my life. And eventually that led to, recommitting to football and eventually earning that scholarship.
Hey, who needs a celebration? All that matters is that you got it. That's the celebration in and of itself.
No question.
Yes, sir.
No question.
So you entered Oklahoma State, wanted to be a sports media major, and then you said you switched majors. So as your career started to wind down, football-wise, junior, senior year, where were you at? Were you looking at, okay, am I going to play at the next level? Am I going to the league? Or were you starting to prepare for life after the game? Where were you at as the football career started to wind down?
Yeah, so first of all, I was not good enough to play in the league, tell you straight up. But what was really cool was whenever I switched majors, here's the reason why. It was during this time when conference realignment was really a conversation with the Big 12 conference. I remember Nebraska left, Texas A&M left. And I remember thinking to myself, you could do that? Like, is that a thing? So I started just really looking into the business of sports, and I fell in love with it. To be honest with you, I fell in love with it, and I changed my major to sports management. And I was really intrigued by the business of sports. I wanted to be involved in intercollegiate athletics for a long time. And I always talk about how intercollegiate athletics is literally one of the most unique experiences in the world. Don't know if any other country even does it. Like, definitely don't do it the way that we do it, right? So always been fascinated by college athletics, but I was fortunate to get elected as the president of what was called the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, right? SAAC. Most of the listeners probably know what SAAC is if you're in the world of comprehensive student athlete development. So I was president of that while I was in college, and that allowed me to go and speak to different SAAC presidents on different campuses in the Big 12 conferences. At that time, TCU and West Virginia had just joined the conference. So I'm talking to them. I'm talking to the folks at Kansas State, University of Texas. They're giving me all kinds of ideas. I'm taking them and I'm implementing it at Oklahoma State. And I was the first Oklahoma State student athlete to be elected chair of SAAC for the Big 12 conference. Ended up getting elected chair of SAAC. And what was so cool about that was it was during a time when legislative autonomy was a conversation, right? So you're talking about 2012 here. So the Power 5 conferences were going to govern themselves differently than the remaining Division I conferences. And it was really cool for me because I got to sit in on all those meetings. I was taking trips to Indianapolis, going to the NCAA headquarters. And there was one piece of legislation in particular that I got to have a say in, right? When you talk about full cost of attendance and unlimited meals, right? I just remember sitting there, raising my hand and be like, hey, can we do this thing? What can we do about unlimited meals? And can it be made available to walk-ons as well, right? And they wrote it down. Fast forward like a year, the legislation ended up passing, right? So I always hold on to that one thing. And I'm like, hey, I got to have a say in that. But it was really cool just being a part of those conversations. And really what that did is it fueled my fire even more for wanting to be involved in intercollegiate athletics. So whenever it was time for me to transition out of my sport, I kind of already knew what I wanted to do. I remember going through pro day at Oklahoma State and walking off that field, thinking to myself, that is the last time that I'm ever going to be on a football field for competition purposes. And I was completely at peace with that.
Wow, man. Wow. And congratulations on making that major change, man. That's huge. I would be holding on to that too. Like you're literally feeding people with that. You fed people, bro.
I hardly ever talk about it, man. But so much of that just has to do with my own experience. I remember being a walk-on and the scholarship student athletes are going to training table. And then me and the rest of the walk-ons, we're like, all right, let's go find some food on campus or wherever we can. So I was just like, man, it doesn't make you feel like you're a part of the team. So that was what was in the back of my mind the whole time they were talking about that legislation. So I was like, yeah, let's make this available to everybody.
Right, man. Even without whether you're a walk-on or not, like just the fact that the meals were unlimited and you were part of that legislation too, because I remember running out of points, man. I ran out of meal points usually like halfway through the semester. Then I'm hungry or having to ask mom and dad to send me some money. So it's like, that's huge, man.
Makes a huge difference.
It does. I want to get back to kind of your trajectory though, man, because it's been really awesome as I was doing my research on it and kind of listening to some of the background story. So you have that experience while you're still enrolled. What happens after graduation? How did you launch your career kind of, in player development and continue that trajectory you're already on?
Yeah, I mean, I always say, bro, a piece of advice that I received years ago while I was in college was you're either in the people business or you're out of business. And it's always about the relationships. So whenever I was able to transition out of college, I knew that I was going to have to rely on people. I had a great mentor by the name of Ed Stewart, who was the deputy commissioner of the Big 12 Conference. And he connected me with a guy named Mike Harity at the University of Notre Dame. And they had just happened to be looking for somebody in their department, student welfare and development, right? The athletic department, comprehensive student athlete development. So you're talking about leadership development, community outreach, as well as career preparation for all 720 plus of the student athletes at Notre Dame. Mike reached out to Ed. Ed gave them my name. And I remember it was Memorial Day weekend. He called me up and he said, "Hey, we're thinking about bringing somebody in. Ed brought up your name. Is this something that you would be interested in?" Actually, he didn't even tell me about the job. He just kind of wanted to get a feel of what kind of person I was over the phone. So the following day, he sends me an email with just all the information about their department. I thought they were doing it better than anybody else in the country. And I'd been exposed to several student athlete development departments. And he called me up that following Tuesday and he offered me the job. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, yeah, I'd love to be able to go up there. I didn't even know where the heck Notre Dame was. I knew nothing about South Indiana. But July 14th, 2014 was my start day. I remember that because that's my birthday. I just turned 23 years old and I was, starting my new job. So that's how the transition happened. And when you talk about relationships, after a year of being at the University of Notre Dame, it was Mike who was in conversations with somebody else at the Miami Dolphins. And that person had told him, "Hey, heard about what you guys are doing over here at Notre Dame. We're trying to implement a lot of similar things in player engagement. Do you know somebody who would be good?" And he threw out my name again. And on my birthday, he offered me the job. So a year later, on my birthday again, he offered me the job. And 2 weeks later, I started. I packed up my little Volkswagen at the time with everything that I owned, drove 19 hours from Notre Dame down to South Florida and started working for the Dolphins. So sorry, I fast forwarded the story a little bit, but yeah, that's how I was able to transition out, man, just through relationships.
No, that's great, man. And I love what you said about, you're either in the people business or you're out of business.
Yeah.
Because really, obviously, the positions that you've been able to put yourself in, of course, it's based on people and relationships, but also doing a great job where your feet are planted. Wherever you found yourself, you were putting in work. And so I want listeners to take that away for a second because when I'm working with former athletes, this is something that I constantly am preaching. You don't just want to be sending out your resume. You're just, "Hey, can you help me get a job?" It's about building that genuine connection and trying to serve and actually impressing people, like not just connecting with people, but impressing them once they give you an opportunity, which in your case, like you just said, Eve, led to opportunity after opportunity.
Yeah, man. If there's one thing that it's like one piece of career advice that I always give people who are trying to get into the space, really any space. Find one thing, one project that you can just take on and say, "This is mine. Like this thing, I'm going to see it through from beginning to the end. And this is it's going to be the best thing that we do this year." And whenever you can do that, people are going to go and they're going to vouch for you because you did this thing with excellence. And whenever you can just say "Hey, project management skills are on point, event management skills are on point. I can think things through logistically." And I was able to get a whole bunch of people involved, whether it's the media, whether it's student athletes, whether it's coaches, whatever it is. You have to be able to find that one thing that you're just going to elevate and take it to another level. And that's what I was able to do just on campus at Oklahoma State, right? With whether it had to do with the legislation or making sure that career development was on point with the student athletes. And whenever I got to Notre Dame, I took on this project that had to do with, we were building a house for Habitat for Humanity, got the entire athletic department involved, got a ton of media coverage, got some good press on it. And I was like, that was my one thing, right? That's my project. I'm taking this thing on and it's going to be great. And I always tell people that, whenever you're starting out, you have to be able to show and prove because nobody's going to vouch for you if they think that you're somebody who can't execute.
That's real. That's real, man. This actually leads me to something else I wanted to talk to you about because once again, I heard you in another interview, you were talking about your time in Miami with the Dolphins. They weren't having a good run while you were there. And you talked about how your role, because it was player development and player engagement, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Which essentially is the same thing. They just league office just changed the name to player engagement.
Got you. Okay. So a couple of things, and this is like a two-part question. First, can you just talk about your experience there? And more specifically, because I appreciated hearing you talk about this when I was watching that other interview. You talked about the atmosphere wasn't very positive because the team wasn't winning at the time, yet it was your job to come in there and generate yourself and create this energy amongst the players So can you just touch on that a little bit and just also talk about your experience as a whole working at that level?
Taj, I'm gonna tell you something, bro. And you know this, when you're working in player engagement, you are everything. Like you're not just a player engagement professional. You're a life coach. You're dang near a psychologist. I mean, you are an agent. You're a parent. You're a big brother. You're all these different things. So getting down to the Miami Dolphins, and I get there under head coach Joe Philbin, who great person, extremely detailed when it comes to game planning and things like that. But man, the players just, I don't know, it didn't feel like they were all the way bought in, right? So we're there, and whenever you're losing, it affects everybody. It affects the entire building. And I was really fortunate to work underneath Caleb Thornhill, who was there at the time. And Caleb is a guy who, he said, look, man, you can either be somebody who brings the energy, or you'll be an energy vampire. You suck the energy out of the room. So I always want to be that person who, whenever I walked in, man, I'm bringing the energy. So that was one of the biggest things that I always focused on. And one of the biggest ways to get that buy-in from the players, to be honest with you, was making sure that all the mandated stuff that we did with the rookies, that you did that as good as possible, because they go back to the locker room. And whenever they tell the vets how you're able to hook them up and look out for them, now word of mouth is the greatest marketing tool that you have, right? So I always made sure that whether it was financial literacy programming that we did, transitioning in programming that we did, right? Core values, you talk about goal setting, you talk about routine management. When you talk about having people in the locker room come in and do certain panels with the rookies, leveraging your NFL identity so that you can figure out exactly what it is that you want to do and not what you're going to have to do whenever the game is over. So all these different things that we used to do, it created so much buy-in within the locker room. And that's the biggest thing I always tell people, right? If you don't have the trust of the players, and if you don't have the trust of the coaches, nothing that you do is going to even matter, because you can't do this job without the trust. So I was able to, build up that trust, Caleb and I, to the point to where our team owner was really invested into what we were doing. And he helped us create a program down there called the Dolphins Business Combine that's still going strong to this day. So team owners bought in, that almost makes you like unfireable. You know what I mean? Like, regardless of how many different head coaches are coming in and out, whatever, you're like, look, we good with the team owner. So I always say, like, you got to find different ways to have multiple people, right? Multiple stakeholders within the organization buy into what you're doing. Oftentimes that just means revising what you're saying to fit what they do and see how we can benefit them as well. Because we had the community relations group tied in, but we also had the sponsorship groups tied in. We had our marketing department tied in, PR, communications, all that. I always say, like, nobody touch more different departments than us, maybe outside of HR, right? But the experience, honestly, was incredible. It was an incredible experience to see how things operate at such a high level on the football side as well as on the business side. And it actually allowed me to really open up my mind into, what the entire sports industry ecosystem looked like. And it sparked my curiosity. It led me to, to really wanted to explore, what is the trajectory of my career going to look like? And one of the things that I realized is I always wanted my career to be more relational and less transactional. So every decision that I make career-wise always just kind of keeps that in mind.
That's good, man. That's good. And speaking of that, after your time with the Dolphins, did you publish the book right out? Because you just published the book last year, correct? In 2021?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, well, let's just start with that before we get into what you're doing now. But what is it that had you want to even become an author in the first place? And then also, what was the process like of writing and publishing that book?
Man, so my wife and I, whenever we left Miami and we moved back to Texas, right? Well, she's from California, but we moved to Texas. That's a whole nother story in itself, an extreme, just a spiritual journey. But getting here, we did a gifts assessment. So one night we had a date night. We just wrote down, hey, what are gifts that we both possess? And, any and everything that you could think of, hey, whether it's public speaking, whether it's coaching, if it's, you have a good smile. Not a lot of people have not everybody has a good smile, right? Hey, you know how to connect to people, whatever it is. So we just wrote down every single thing that we felt like we were gifted in. And then we gave every single one of those gifts an assignment, right? What is it that this gift can do for us as a family? How is this gift going to bring us money as a family? So for me, one of the things that I wrote down is speaking. I always feel like, hey, I go and I read through and proofread people's emails, copywriting and things like that. I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a book. And I'd been talking about it for a long time anyway. So it was the perfect time to actually do it. And I just remember this conversation that a friend of mine and I had with him and his wife. And he was telling me about how I was a great storyteller. Never really saw myself as that before, but whenever he said that, it reinforced it in me. And I was like, you know what? That goes to show the power of words, right? You go, you give somebody a compliment, you don't know what it could spark inside of them. I was like, you know what? I'm going to tell the story. So I wrote the book, Immigrant American, Living an American Life with African Perspectives. So much of that has to do with my journey from Africa to America, but also a lot of the values that I was able to gather while at home. And whenever I walked outside of my home, it was almost like living in a different world, because the inside of my house felt like I was in Africa. The food, the clothes that we wore, the way that we spoke, but then there was a different barrier whenever I stepped outside of those doors, right? So different elements of life and writing about that through there, whether it had to do with religion, relationships, identity fraud, different things like that. And that process of writing that book was so therapeutic. Like, it felt like I was going through therapy, man. And it really allowed me to believe in the power of writing. I think that there's nothing that clears your thoughts, or at least processes your thoughts, as well as you do whenever you're writing your thoughts down. And one of the great things about that is I got to actually go back and have conversations with my siblings, with my parents, with my aunts and uncles about what their experiences were like whenever we were transitioning from Africa to the United States of America. And hearing their stories and the way that I remembered the stories and getting the full picture of everything was just so powerful for me. And so, I decided to go to self-publishing route, had a ton of help from individuals who had written books in the past. And yeah, we're doing it now, and got the book on Amazon whenever it was released. I think it was number 3 on the best-selling list, or on the new releases, I should say, and number 23 on the best-selling list that first week that it was released, man. So, didn't really expect that, but man, it's been incredible to see all the support that it's gotten.
That's nice, man. That means congratulations on that, because that means you had a lot of people come out and show love and support.
Definitely.
Not only the fact that you accomplished the book, but like writing it and publishing it, but the fact that people actually showed up to support, that means everything. So that's huge, man. Congrats.
Yeah, and there was a whole just like launching strategy that we had to come to, just to come up with email lists, with social media output, all that together. But definitely learned a lot throughout that process.
For sure, man. I'm not sure if I shared this with you the last time we spoke, but you see my books behind me, when I published my first book, I actually joined forces with a publishing company that helped me publish my book, Self-Publish in 30 Days. And I did that because what I'm able to do now is help other athletes tell their stories. Just like, you know how it is, man. A lot of people don't even know where to start. So like you had people help you, I can now help other people write, publish, have the strategy to actually launch their books.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, man, this because you mentioned it being therapeutic, which is huge. I always tell people, like, you want to process things that are still kind of festering inside of you. Writing a book is a phenomenal way to do that. Yeah. It forces you to look at your thoughts. What about from a business perspective, man? I always tell people, when I published my first book, like, people treated me like I had a PhD, like all of a sudden. What from a business perspective did you see shift, or, how did it enhance the business side of things for you by becoming a published author?
Yeah, I think whenever you write a book, for whatever reason, people just view you as the subject matter expert on this one thing, right here, Immigrant American. So I have like literally organizations that deal with immigration, that deal with refugees, that have reached out to me, that want me to come in and speak, right? So from a speaking standpoint, it's even unlocked a whole bunch of doors, right? So I'm gonna be in Portland, I'm gonna be in Mississippi, I'm gonna be in the South, like the south of Texas, close to the border, speaking to individuals that deal with immigration or being first or second generation American, right? And encouraging them and giving away some practical tips that they can use. That's been amazing, man. Yeah, I mean, from a business standpoint, I just think that honestly, every single person needs to go ahead and write a book on something that they feel like they are a subject matter expert on, even if that means collaborating with other individuals to write that book. But yeah, that entire process, man, it's been incredible, and it's definitely unlocked some business opportunities.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, congratulations on that. I didn't even think about from the immigration side of things, and you being able to go in and speak. That's But once again, that's the type of stuff that's unlocked by you putting the book out there and getting it in the right hands. So
yeah, man, and you don't know, man. Like you get one of the people who reached out to me, he was like, "Yeah, I don't know how I came across your book or how I came about the video of you talking about your book, but I came across it. I want you to come to Wisconsin and I want you to speak to some of our students who are first generation." Right? I'm like, I didn't even know there was first generation folks in Wisconsin. You know what I mean? I thought there was all in Florida, Texas, and the West Coast, but here we are. So it's real interesting, man. The amount of doors that it has unlocked. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, man. I didn't want to say it like Wisconsin. What made them choose that location? But hey, more power to them. You know,
Right.
obviously
Exactly.
they're doing well out there, so more power to them, man. Another quick side note, man. I took an Ancestry.com test, and it turns out I'm 30% Congolese, man. I didn't even know.
Okay.
So I'm
Yeah.
like,
Did it say Congo/Bantu people? Was that the result? Or
I think that was on there.
okay.
It was almost like two separate categories, though.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah, it's so
you know
hard to track the specifics, right? Especially whenever you get into the details of like the tribes that you may come from. But I think everybody needs to do it, man. Quick story. I remember my wife and I, we were in France for our honeymoon, and we met up with some of my family members who actually live in France. And while we're over there talking to them, they're asking her, they were like, "Hey, where you from?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm from California." So they look at each other. They're like, "No, no, no. Like, where you from before that? Like, before you got to the U.S." And my wife is looking at me like, I don't know what to tell them. Like my wife was born and raised, well, she was born in Germany because her father was in the military, but she's California. And then we were like, you know what, we're gonna find out. So she ended up taking the Ancestry DNA test. But there's something powerful about actually knowing where your people come from, and not just knowing, but actually going back and exploring that land and realizing those roots, man. There's nothing like it.
yeah, man, that's it was just eye opening for me because I was always curious. I mean, obviously being African American, so that could mean a million different things. And sure enough, when I'm looking at the results, it's like there was a million different things on there as expected. But
Right. Yeah.
anyway, man, back to the career trajectory because I want to hear, like, obviously you published a book. What are you up to now? Like, what I know, and you also told me this may be top secret information, so you don't have to go into it, but you might be working on I believe it was a technology project.
Yeah.
What are you up to these days, man?
Man, this past 2 years has just been a year of completely stretching out, getting outside of my comfort zone, exploring things that I was unfamiliar with. And one of the things was becoming my own business, essentially, right? So went ahead, filed an LLC, started a consulting company to where consulting with different sports agencies, and really from the player development angle, and helping them with their athlete representation side. So talking to different sports agencies about so much of the knowledge that I've been able to gain from 2011 all the way up until now, when it comes to comprehensive athlete development and how agencies could better support the athletes that they represent from that standpoint. So started doing that. And then one of the agencies called Neostar Inc. said, "Hey, we actually need a lot of help with our marketing as well, man. Do you think that you could do that?" So opening up my eyes to, brand management and marketing, athlete marketing specifically, that was, it was fun more than anything else, man. It was fun, like going about and matching people to these brand deals, and not just anything that's generic, not using a cookie cutter approach, but really making it specific to that individual and the things that they care about and are passionate about, especially when the name, image, and likeness legislation passed in July 2020 for intercollegiate athletics, right? So getting to be creative with that has been great. Right now, right, still helping out a lot with athlete representation with an agency called VMG Sports, Vantage Management Group. So that's been fun as well, right? Doing stuff with Vantage, doing stuff with Neostar, collaborating with different universities across the country, and also speaking. Not too long ago, maybe about 8 months ago, a friend of mine who was a serial entrepreneur had started a business, sold it for a couple million, started another business, raised it up to a couple million. He said, "Hey, I have this idea, and I don't want to talk about it yet because we're kind of building in stealth right now. We're gonna launch later. Have this idea that joins both of our superpowers: my experience in the sports industry, his experience with what he had been doing with with different startups." And he said, if there was ever an opportunity for us to join powers, man, it would be now. And we've been working on that. And my mind has been completely expanded when talking to these VC firms, investors, hedge fund managers, other founders, right? Co-founders. I'm like, man, this is a whole nother world that I had never been exposed to. And I thought I was pretty business savvy. I thought my business acumen was pretty good until you start meeting these different founders. And not only are you meeting them, but you're starting your company on your own as well. And so, yeah, it's me and my co-founder. We've been doing a lot of traveling lately, meeting with different investors and different individuals who have been able to get our legal documents in order and building a business that honestly, that we believe is going to be something that's not just $1 billion business, but potentially be $1 trillion business. And yeah, so, you know, building it slowly. And man, whenever this thing comes out, I don't think the timing could be any better than what we're doing right now. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Yeah, man. That's enough said, man. It sounds awesome. Congratulations on that. I'm excited to see that roll out whenever it drops. I will definitely be tuning in. And speaking of tuning in, man, I do have one final question for you. But before we even do that, you've already been so gracious with your time, man. I know people are going to take a lot by hearing your story and the way you've been able to keep building and put yourself in position and just continue to lead and serve. But you already mentioned the book. But before I ask this last question, man, can you tell people how they can get in touch with you? We'll have it in the show notes and everything too. But where's the best place to follow you, get in touch with you, all that kind of good stuff?
Hey, the best thing about having the name that I have is there are not that many people in the world that have it, right? Yves Batoba. There's actually one other person in the world that has the same name that I do. And I found him on Facebook, or he found me on Facebook. He's from Congo too. I'm like, what in the world is going on here? But yeah, so Yves Batoba or at Y Batoba on every single platform. So what you're talking about, YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, all of it, man, I'm on it.
That's great, man. Yeah, but this man's not hard to find, folks. Just Google the name, right? And make sure you pronounce it correctly.
And YvesBatoba.com as well. You can go on there, look at some of the merch, look at where you can get the book, book me to speak, you know, whatever have you. YvesBatoba.com is a good hub for that.
That's great, man. Yeah, I did the same thing. Like, my name is Taj Deshaun Johnson, but when I try to do TajJohnson.com, there's a lot of Taj Johnson is like, I think it was Eddie George's wife or something like that. So like, listen, man, I'm just going by Taj Deshaun. That way, when you type that in, you only see me. So
I'm telling you, man, hey, hashtag branding. That's all it is. Make sure you find me as easy to find as possible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But man, the final question, because, you know, we have a lot of mostly former athletes, but a lot of people in, you know, athletic departments, coaches, parents of athletes who tune in. Just some quick advice, man. Obviously, your journey and your story in and of itself is the advice. But just off the top of your head, for all the athletes tuning in who may feel lost right now, you know, obviously the name of the show is Thrive After Sports. What advice can you give to an athlete who they're about to hang up the jersey, or they just hung up the jersey for the last time? And they're like, man, I don't even know where to start. I don't know who I am. Can you just speak to that a little bit?
I would say, number one, have a good, strong spiritual foundation. You know, whatever it is that you believe in, because I tell you what, the transition's hard. And it doesn't matter if you feel completely prepared to be able to go into the next phase of your life. I thought I was prepared, and I felt depressed after I was done with football. You know, 12 years of your life, just boom, gone like that. So make sure that you have that foundation. It makes things easier to go through, right? And then establish your why. You know, why is it that you want to do what you want to do? Because once you know that why, all that does is, whenever you go through those hard days, the tough days, it is you don't keep pushing. The why at least keeps you going, right? I heard somebody say it like this once. They said, if the why doesn't make you cry, then the price of commitment will always be too high, right? So understand what your why is, because it makes commitment a little bit easier. After that, I think that it's so important to reflect. When you talk about transformational change, there are really three elements. There's experience, there's new information, and there's reflection. Oftentimes, people go through experiences, they get new information, but they don't actually take the time to stop and reflect. But reflection might be the most important part, all right? And 70% of it is going to be experience, right? What you go through in life. 10% of it is a reflection. But whenever you're able to reflect, what happens is you gain new information, and then you go and you apply that information. So make sure that you take the time to actually stop and reflect. And I think that whenever you do go back and reflect, especially as a current athlete, go back and look at the things that you have enjoyed in the past, right? Whether that's a course, whether that's a teacher, whether that's a professor, whether that's something that you came across on a podcast, in a book, whatever it is. Write those things down and figure out, hey, how is it that I can use these things that I enjoy to actually create a life out of it, right? Help me make something out of myself out of it. Those are the top two pieces of advice for me, for sure, right? The reflection and the spiritual foundation. Honestly, without those two things, man, I don't know where I'd be.
That's good, man. Hey, that's a lot of gems drop right there. We can end it right there, man. That was perfect. I appreciate that. Yves, this has been an honor, man. I knew this was going to be good. Turned out even better than I expected. I'm excited to watch and listen back to this episode for me, and even more excited for everyone else to check it out, man. So definitely appreciate you spending some time today. Thank you for all the things that you're doing. Thank you for being an inspiration. And you, sir, are the prime definition of what it looks like to thrive after sports. So, Yves, thanks again for being on here today, brother.
My man, Taj, thank you so much for having me on here, man. Hey, I'm excited for what kind of value this can provide to anybody that goes in and listens to it. Appreciate the work that you're doing, man. Like I said, this is my wheelhouse. I love this topic. So many people are going to be able to benefit from what you're doing, man. So keep up the good work, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. I received that. Well, folks, this has been another great episode of Thrive After Sports with the man himself, Yves Batoba. Make sure you check the show notes. Follow this man on social media. Obviously, he's a wealth of knowledge. So you want to stay tuned with the journey, especially when that new project he's working on drops. I'll be tuned in. Yes, sir. All right, folks. Everybody have a good one. We'll see you on the next episode. Peace.
Peace.